Clarity feels like wisdom, but the first thing it usually does is destroy things. Old friendships start to feel empty. Work starts to feel fake. Small talk gets harder. Silence gets louder. It's not because life got worse. It's because nothing unravels comfort faster than finally seeing it for what it really is. Most people say they want clarity. What they really want is reassurance. They want a clearer version of the life they already built, not a reason to leave it behind. But real clarity doesn't give confirmation. It gives confrontation. It forces hard questions about who was chosen out of guilt and who was tolerated out of fear, about how much of the daily routine is survival in disguise, about whether the identity that's being protected is even real anymore. Clarity doesn't show up with a plan. It shows up like a mirror, cold, quiet, and honest. And when it lands, it doesn't always feel empowering. It feels isolating. Because the second things start to make sense, they also start to fall apart. The patterns are obvious now. The manipulation is visible. The internal excuses don't work anymore. And the gap between what's true and what's being tolerated starts to grow fast. The job looks stable but feels dead. The relationships still function but feel distant. The distractions don't distract. The goals don't satisfy. And it's not a crisis. It's just clarity doing its job, removing the lie layer by layer until all that's left is choice. Stay or leave. Repeat or rebuild. Lieutenant or live. Most people go back to pretending at this point, because pretending hurts less than dismantling something they spent years building. But pretending doesn't make the truth go away. It just pushes it underground, where it waits, quietly, until the next moment of stillness, when it rises again, asking the same question clarity always asks. Now that you see it for what it is, what are you going to do about it? Clarity isn't comfortable, it's clean. That's the difference. It doesn't offer a plan, it offers a mirror. And once the reflection is honest, pretending becomes a conscious choice. That's the real cost. Not the loss of what's fake, but the inability to keep living inside it. Because now, everything that used to feel normal starts to feel unbearable. The conversations that once passed the time now sound hollow. The habits that once helped you survive now feel like sabotage. The goals that once lit a fire don't even register. And it's not because those things are bad. It's because you're not lying to yourself anymore. That's what changes everything. Not the environment, the awareness, not the circumstances, the way you see them. So, the job still looks the same. But now you know it's draining your soul. The relationship still functions. But now you recognize the emotional starvation. The friends still show up. But now you feel what they really offer. Proximity, not depth. It's clarity that makes those things intolerable. But here's the trap. Clarity doesn't give you the strength to act. It only removes the ability to stay blind. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most people get stuck. They start to grieve before they even make the change. They imagine the loss before it happens. They picture the silence, the discomfort, the consequences. And that imagined future feels too big to carry. So they freeze, they journal, they process, they loop in reflection, calling it preparation. But really, they're trying to delay the part where the cost gets real. Because the second you act on clarity, something old has to die. A version of self, a role, a relationship, a coping mechanism, something that used to keep the story intact. And what follows is identity crisis. The realization that so much of who you were was built around tolerating what's now unacceptable. So now it's not just about leaving the thing. It's about becoming someone who never needed it. Someone who doesn't apologize for walking away. Someone who doesn't need to be understood to move on. Someone who can sit in the discomfort of truth. and not try to edit it into something more convenient. That's what most people aren't ready for. Not the truth itself, but what the truth demands after it's seen. Because clarity without action creates agony. You know too much to go back, but you haven't yet stepped into what's next. So you exist in the in-between, aware of the lie, still living inside it, and it eats at you, until the cost of staying finally becomes heavier than the fear of leaving. The truth didn't ask to be found. It didn't knock, didn't raise its voice. It waited, quietly, patiently, until life slowed down just enough for the lie to become unbearable. And once it arrived, it didn't offer comfort. It offered responsibility. Because now, every choice is aware. Every excuse is conscious. Every moment spent in the old life becomes something you carry, knowing it's no longer honest. That's the final cost of clarity. You don't get to blame anyone else for staying stuck. You know too much. The patterns are exposed. The roles are expired. The stories that used to keep you anchored don't land the same way anymore. And here's where people get it wrong. They think the next step has to be massive. Cut ties, burn it down, start fresh. But that's just another performance. What clarity actually asks for is something quieter, less dramatic, more sustainable. It asks for alignment, not as an idea, but as a practice, daily, in the small things. It starts when you stop explaining your truth to people who don't want to hear it. It starts when you walk away before you have the perfect reason. It starts when you stop bending to stay digestible. Clarity doesn't want a big moment. It wants consistency. It wants the version of you that no longer chases permission, the one who lets silence answer what language can't fix, the one who can say, "This doesn't work for me anymore," and mean it, even when it hurts. Because yes, it will hurt. Growth doesn't skip grief. Even when the thing you're letting go was never healthy, it still gave you something. Structure, identity, a reason to stay the same. Letting go of that, that's not light work. It means mourning the comfort of dysfunction. It means sitting with loneliness when you stop reaching for the wrong people. It means having no one to blame when you finally take control of your life. And realizing that freedom comes with silence too. But that silence is where it starts, the real rebuilding. Not into a perfect version of self, but into one that's honest, grounded, unapologetically real. That version won't be loud. They won't need to convince anyone. They won't seek approval for choosing peace over performance. They'll just show up differently. In rooms they used to shrink inside. In conversations they used to fake their way through. In decisions they used to overthink out of fear. And over time, people will notice. Not because you said anything, but because the role you used to play is gone. Some will leave. They'll call you distant, cold, changed. Let them. That part isn't your burden anymore. Because clarity doesn't just change how you see the world. It changes how the world responds to you when you stop performing inside it. There's a peace that follows truth, but it's quiet, not euphoric, not cinematic, just steady. The kind of peace that feels like finally being alone without abandoning yourself. That's what the process gives you. Not a perfect life, but a version of self you don't have to argue with anymore. A version that doesn't shrink in rooms that no longer deserve access. That doesn't overextend just to stay liked. That doesn't confuse being needed with being loved. From there, everything rebuilds. Not quickly, not cleanly, but honestly. Because once clarity strips away what was false, what's left is choice. And this time, it's yours. No longer managed by fear. No longer shaped by noise. Just yours.